This is World History. My name is Dr. Long. This video addresses early East Asian civilizations. East Asia is an area of the world comprised of China, Taiwan, Korea, Japan, and Mongolia. East Asian nations are part of a civilization with distinctive and unique cultural characteristics, similar to the Western world that emerged out of ancient Greece and Rome. The earliest peoples reached East Asia from Africa around 25,000 BCE. All of East Asia was populated during the Stone Age. However, it would be anachronistic to think of Stone Age peoples in East Asia as Chinese, Japanese, or Korean. Now, by far, the most influential nation in early East Asian history was China. As a distinct civilization, China began around 3000 BCE in what is now northern China and in an area along the lower Yellow River known as the Central Plain. People living in the Central Plain learned to grow a grain called millet and later wheat. They had bronze and built large walled villages. Around 2205 BCE, according to traditional Chinese accounts, a legendary figure known as Yu the Great unified the Central Plain. As Emperor Yu was known for his wisdom and for bringing flood control, his rule marked the beginning of the first dynasty in China, the Xia dynasty, which would rule from 2205 to 1766 BCE. A dynasty is a family of rulers that would rule as emperors over a centralized state. There have been a number of dynasties throughout Chinese history, and the Chinese have marked long periods of time by dynasties. Dynasties often would come to an end when the ruling family was weak, incompetent, or corrupt, or unable to deal with revolts or foreign invasions. This in turn would lead to them being overthrown and replaced with yet a new dynasty. So Chinese history has a cycle of dynasties. Most Chinese rulers were men, emperors. However, in a few cases, women did wield great powers as emperor dowagers. In Chinese culture, especially in Confucian teaching, governments should be virtuous. Governments that ruled well were thought to have the approval of heaven, a concept in China known as the mandate of heaven. However, legitimate rule was seen as linked to good government. When a dynasty ruled poorly, it could lose the mandate of heaven and face its downfall. The idea of the mandate of heaven became important in early Chinese history. Because there is so little evidence about the first dynasty, the Xi dynasty, some scholars, such as Sarah Allen, have argued that the Xi dynasty did not exist and that stories told about it much later were fabricated for political reasons. Still, more recent archaeological evidence tends to favor the traditional view of Chinese history. Traditionally, Chinese history stresses what are called the three dynasties, the first three dynasties in Chinese history. The Xi dynasty from 2205 to 1766 BCE, the Shang dynasty from 1766 to 1045 BCE, and then the Zhou dynasty from 1045 to 256 BCE. The last 200 years or so of the Zhou dynasty was known as the period of the warring states from 400 to 200 BCE because of so much infighting in China in that time. Now, under the Shang dynasty, which ruled from 1766 to 1055 BCE, China expanded its territory from the Central Plains and its culture began to take shape. For instance, with the development of the Chinese character-based writing system. However, the Zhou dynasty from 1045 to 256 BC is widely regarded as the formative era in Chinese civilization. Emperors during the Zhou dynasty engaged in an extensive diking of the Yellow River. Now, this massive engineering project under the Zhou resulted in better drainage of water in the Yellow River Valley, bringing more cropland under cultivation. Under the Zhou, all works of classical Chinese literature and schools of thought also took shape. This especially included Confucianism, which is incredibly influential on Chinese civilization. For his part, Master Kang, or Confucius as he was commonly known, lived in the 6th century BCE. By this time, conditions in China had become a little chaotic. Confucius, therefore, looked back to the rulers of the early Zhou dynasty as better examples. Confucius was a teacher who was passionately interested in good government, proper social relations, and respect for all human beings. Confucius's sayings and teachings were written down by his disciples and formed the basis of an important work in the Confucian canon of texts known as the Analects. While as a system of thought, Confucianism has many different texts, the Analects, which records much of Confucius's thought, best summarizes Confucius's sayings and teachings. Confucianism teaches that the heavenly realm, or the cosmos, operates on its own, automatically, and has done so since the beginning of time. As such, Confucianism isn't really interested in and doesn't really deal with questions about God or the afterlife or the spiritual world. Rather, Confucianism focuses on this world, this life. Confucianism stresses self-cultivation, that every human being should undergo self-refinement and seek self-improvement. This includes empathy and a version of the Golden Rule. As Confucius put it, what you do not want for yourself, do not do to others. Confucianism also highly values learning and education. And finally, Confucianism places a great deal of emphasis on ritual, seeing ritual as being part of a civilized human being's behavior. Confucianism stressed 5 social relations, 5 very important social relations. First, father to son. Second, ruler to subject. Third, husband to wife. Fourth, older brother to younger brother. And fifth, friend to friend. Now these are conceived of as hierarchical relationships with a superior and inferior role in each relationship. The family is also very important to Confucianism. This especially includes obedience to parents and respect for those who are elders. Sons, especially older sons, are supposed to take care of their parents in their old age. This is known as filial piety. In fact, in Confucianism, care of parents does not end with their death, but rather with the death of the son, as Confucianism also includes ritual ancestor worship. Respect for those above you in power, for the elderly, for your parents, are still extremely important values in East Asian nations such as China, North and South Korea, and Japan. And this is still true today. This is due to the legacy of Confucianism. During the Zhou dynasty and after Confucius' death, 2 Confucian teachers were particularly influential as well as indicative of a variety and differences that emerged within the Confucius school of thought. The first was Meneses, who lived in the 5th century BCE. The next was Zhuangzi, who lived in the 3rd century BCE. Both of these teachers agreed with the basics of Confucianism. However, Meneses believed that human nature was naturally good, while Zhuangzi saw it as naturally evil. In addition to Confucianism, Taoism also took place during the Zhou dynasty. Taoism is a word that means the way or the path. Its founder was Lao Tzu, a term which means old master. According to tradition, Lao Tzu was a contemporary of Confucius. Taoism teaches that the Tao is an impersonal force and the origin of all reality, but is beyond human comprehension. By the way, in the Star Wars series, the concept of the Force is loosely based on the Tao. Taoism stresses living in harmony with nature and with the universe. Taoists came to have a deep respect for nature and living in balance with nature. This idea of balance is best expressed in the concept of the yin and the yang. The yin is seen as dark, negative, passive, and feminine, while the yang is light, positive, energetic, and masculine. These opposites are said to live in balance. Taoism also believed that change is a constant part of life. As with Confucianism, over time Taoism came to have many texts further explaining its beliefs. Another system of thought that emerged under the Zhou dynasty was legalism. This viewpoint argued that only a strong, repressive, authoritarian state could bring chaos and enforce law and order. And indeed, the last part of the Zhou dynasty, the warring period, was known for this sort of chaos, making legalism popular among some people. Finally, during the Zhou dynasty, which again towards its end saw a lot of chaos and warfare, a teacher known as Sun Tzu also wrote a text known as The Art of War. Now, The Art of War is the first systematic military treatise in all of human history. Sun Tzu was a pragmatic thinker and sought military victory above all else. Yet he downplayed brute force in war. Instead, he argued in favor of intelligence and saw surprise and trickery as key to winning wars. For Sun Tzu, wars are best won with brains, not brawn. And the best victories are those that involve as little fighting and destruction as possible. Confucianism, Taoism, legalism, and Sun Tzu's The Art of War were all key elements of early Chinese civilization, in part emerged as response to the chaos in China towards the end of the Zhou dynasty, the period of the warring states. Now, so far in this video, I've focused almost exclusively on China. This is because Chinese civilization, from its character-based writing system to Confucianism, Taoism, Sun Tzu, legalism, all exerted a very profound influence on Korea and Japan. Prehistoric humans came to Korea around 10,000 BCE. By around 1000 BCE, Korea came to have bronze metalwork and rice cultivation. Rice cultivation likely came from South China, as North China, where Chinese civilization first took place, grew millet and grain and not rice. Chinese culture likewise strongly influenced Korea. Korea had some early kingdoms, but it was not fully unified until the 7th century CE. Now, prehistoric people first came to Japan around 11,000 BCE, and some of the earliest pottery in the world has actually been found in Japan. Prehistoric peoples in Japan experienced dramatic change around 300 BCE. This was due to huge Korean influence. Large numbers of Koreans immigrated to Japan, bringing bronze and rice cultivation with them. Korean immigrants also mixed with the peoples living in Japan. Koreans and Japanese people not only have common ancestral and DNA ties, but language. Korean and Japanese are distantly related. Early civilizations in Korea and Japan were thus closely intertwined, and neither country yet had any coherent national identity. But above all, and in conclusion, the influence of Chinese culture loomed large on early Korea and Japan. We will see how this continued later in China's Tang Dynasty, when Buddhism will come to Korea and Japan from China as well. With this note, I'll bring this video to a close. Thank you for watching.